Good evening, everyone. It is June 18th, and tonight I'm going to harvest some potatoes. Here in this 20-gallon felt grow bag, I have some potatoes that I planted back in the early middle of March. Growing potatoes is pretty fun. You can grow them in bags, you can grow them in buckets, you can grow them directly in ground. Basically, all you need in order to grow potatoes is a sprouted potato. You shouldn't use conventional potatoes because they are sprayed with a spud inhibitor that tends to prevent the sprouting of potatoes. But you could either go to your garden centers in very early spring and buy insanely expensive seed potatoes of interesting varieties, or you could go to the store and just buy certified organic potatoes and then just let them sit in the shade in your pantry until they start to sprout. And then all you do is you plant them about 6 inches deep. And the best time to plant them is going to be about 2 weeks before your last frost date. You want it to be in between the last freeze date and the last frost date. And since you're burying them about 6 inches underground, frost is not going to be an issue. And if they start to sprout above the soil while it's still frosting, just cover them with a little bit of soil until the frost date has passed and you're safe. So I planted these probably around March 10th, March 15th. This is one of those insanely expensive seed type potatoes because I wanted to grow an interesting purple variety. And you can tell that it's time to harvest potatoes because all of the foliage is dying back. When it starts looking like this, that indicates that it is now time to harvest your potatoes. You also know it's time to harvest your potatoes because you can literally see some of the spuds starting to break ground. They are popping up. So with potatoes, some people like to hill their potatoes. That's kind of not necessary. You only need to bury them about 6 inches. And potatoes grow down from the seed potato. A sprouted potato basically acts like it's almost like a potato bomb, and then the roots grow down and new potatoes begin to form along the roots, and then the plants shoot up to collect the solar radiation and feed the plant, give it its sugars via photosynthesis. So all we're going to do is we're going to take this container, we're going to flip it over, and we are going to pull the potatoes out of it. Because I chose to grow the potatoes in a container, I have lots of good compost in there, so I'm going to dump it here where I don't really have good compost in my beds. So I'm just going to flip this on its face, and that's a 20-gallon grow bag right there. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the potatoes out of here, and I'm going to throw them in this wheelbarrow over here. You can see how they cling on to the roots of the plant. Pretty neat. Now, one thing you don't want to do with potatoes is wipe the dirt off. You want the potatoes to stay dirty because you have to keep them in a cool, dry place for a few weeks to cure. Look at all the little guys there. I recommend if you grow potatoes in containers that you grow smaller type potatoes. If you're going to grow something large like a russet, you probably want to grow them directly in ground. Wow, you can just see how many potatoes are on here. That's pretty incredible right there. You really have to dig to find them all. And there is the haul of potatoes for the year. And before you go ahead and say, well, that's not a whole lot of potatoes, all of these potatoes came from 5 seed potatoes. 5 potatoes this size made all of these potatoes down here. That's pretty amazing. So imagine how much you'll get if you go and you buy a 10-pound bag of potatoes for $3 or $4 and you let them all sprout and then you plant them all. You'll have more potatoes than you know what to do with. So they are really, really amazing plants, and they're pretty fun to grow. I only wanted to do it as a fun little experiment because I'm not a big potato consumer, especially little potatoes like this. I really only like russets, but they're really cool to grow, and now I have a whole bunch of compost for my landscaping beds. So if you want to go ahead and grow potatoes, and I recommend you do, the biggest tips I can give you is plant them before your last frost date in the early spring. That's because potatoes need to mature when it's still pretty cool out. They're a cooler weather / warm season crop. That's why they grow well in Ireland. They really like 60 and 70 degree temperatures. The 80s and the 90s start getting too hot for them, so you have to get them in early. Second, it's a lot easier to grow smaller potatoes than it is to grow larger potatoes. And the more earth you can give them underneath to grow, the bigger the yields will be. Potatoes grow on the root system, so don't plant them in some kind of shallow container. They need to grow deep. The third thing is they are a very, very, very heavy feeder. They're one of the heaviest feeders out there. You can feed these potatoes exactly the same way that you feed your tomatoes. They are a nightshade. They're in the exact same family as tomatoes, eggplant, and peppers. So fertilize them the same. I like using Miracle-Gro tomato and fish emulsion and a slow release fertilizer. So I will link to a video above as to how to do that. So that's really all there is to it. Growing potatoes is pretty simple and fun. If you haven't done it, it's a pretty cool little undertaking you can take next year. And it's really fun because you get to basically just plant a potato from the grocery store. Just make sure it is organic and you let it sprout in the dark. Now, before you eat these, you have to let these cure for about 2 weeks. So you don't want to rub the dirt off of them. While they are curing, you need to store them in a cool, dry place out of direct light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little seltzer container and I'm going to move the potatoes. I'm going to move the potatoes in here and I'm going to put them in my pantry. If you have a root cellar or a basement, that is ideal, but I live on the North Carolina coast where the water table is very high and we do not have basements, and there's really nowhere cool for me to put these at this time of year. So these are just going to go in the pantry where my potatoes that I eat are. So we're going to let these sit in the pantry for a couple of weeks. 2 weeks should probably do it. And then you'll be able to eat them. So that's all there is to it, to growing potatoes. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for future updates and more videos like these. And I hope to see you all again next time.